July 2, 1943. Castelvetrano Airfield, Sicily. A German Focke-Wulf 190 banked into position, its pilot focused on American bombers below. He never saw the P-40 Warhawk diving from above until tracer fire ripped through his fuselage. Flames engulfed the cockpit, and the aircraft spiraled into the Sicilian countryside. The victor was First Lieutenant Charles B. Hall, a 22-year-old from Brazil, Indiana. That afternoon, Hall became the first African-American fighter pilot to shoot down an enemy aircraft in World War II, something German commanders, steeped in racial ideology, had declared impossible. On the side of Hall's P-40, mechanics painted a swastika kill mark. It would be the first of 112 enemy aircraft downed by his unit, men the Luftwaffe would come to call the Schwarze Vogelmenschen, the Black Birdmen. For Nazi Germany, which classified black people as Untermensch, incapable of discipline or courage, the victories were a humiliating contradiction written in the skies. But the story began long before Sicily. Back in 1925, the U.S. Army War College had concluded that black soldiers were inherently weak in character, and unfit for technical or leadership roles. For decades, the military resisted giving them opportunities. Yet pioneers like Eugene Bullard, who flew for France in World War I, and Bessie Coleman, who earned her pilot's license in France when no American school would accept her, had already proven those ideas false. By the late 1930s, civil rights leaders such as A. Philip Randolph and Walter White pressed the Roosevelt administration, how could America fight for democracy abroad while denying it at home? Under mounting pressure, Public Law 18 of 1939 authorized training for black pilots. It was framed as an experiment, but it opened the door. In 1941, the 99th Pursuit Squadron was activated, commanded by Captain Benjamin O. Davis Jr., son of the U.S. Army's first black general. At West Point, Davis had endured 4 years of silence. No white cadet spoke to him outside official duties. Now, he carried the burden of proving not only himself, but an entire race's worth. The 99th deployed to North Africa in 1943 under skeptical white commanders who assigned them minor patrol duties. Their first mission on June 2 against Pantelleria Island showed discipline but no kills. Critics called them untested. Some even hoped they would fail. Then came July 2. Escorting B-25 Mitchells over Sicily, Hall spotted 2 Focke-Wulfs diving on the bombers. He broke formation, dove from above, and fired. One German plane erupted in flames. The other turned and fled. It was the breakthrough. From that day forward, the Tuskegee Airmen would prove themselves in mission after mission, 15,000 sorties, 1,578 missions, and 112 aerial victories. Their bomber escort loss rate would be among the lowest of any U.S. fighter group. For both the Luftwaffe and the U.S. Army, the statistics spoke louder than prejudice. The Red Tails not only shattered Nazi racial myths but also forced America itself to confront its own. Charles Hall later testified about that fateful day in Sicily. I saw 2 Focke-Wulfs following the bombers just after the bombs were dropped. I cut inside their turn, fired a long burst, and saw my tracers tear into the second plane. He rolled left, stalled, and went straight into the ground. When Hall landed, the airfield erupted. For the black ground crews who had endured endless slights from white personnel, the victory was more than just a kill. It was vindication. Hall had just secured the first aerial victory by a black American pilot in U.S. military history. Yet recognition did not come easily. By January 1944, the 99th Fighter Squadron had been in combat for 7 months. Their commander, Colonel William Momeyer, filed a scathing report claiming they lacked aggressiveness and recommending their removal from combat altogether. The report reached General Henry Hap Arnold, Chief of the Army Air Forces, who considered shutting down the experiment entirely. Then came Anzio. On January 27, 1944, as the Allies clung to their beachhead in Italy, the Luftwaffe unleashed wave after wave of Focke-Wulf 190s. 15 Tuskegee pilots, flying outclassed P-40 Warhawks, took to the skies. Against superior aircraft, they held their own and more, claiming between 8 and 13 kills in 2 days. Hall himself added 2 more to his tally. In 48 hours, they had destroyed more enemy planes than in their previous 7 months of fighting. The War Department launched a study. The verdict: the 99th performed on par with white squadrons. The critics fell silent. By spring, the Tuskegee experiment was no longer in question. In May 1944, the 332nd Fighter Group was formed, uniting the 99th with 3 more black squadrons. Now under Colonel Benjamin O. Davis Jr. they were reassigned to the 15th Air Force for bomber escort duty. At Ramitelli Airfield in Italy, Davis drilled his men on their mission: "We are not here to be aces. Our job is to bring the bombers home." In June, General Nathan Twining introduced color markings for fighter groups. The 332nd painted their entire tail assemblies crimson. Soon, bomber crews across Europe knew the legend: the Red Tails never left their charges. Requests spread: "Give us the Red Tails if you can get them." Their reputation would be tested on July 18, 1944. 66 Mustangs under Davis rendezvoused with bombers near Munich. When the formation was late, Davis held his fighters orbiting over hostile territory. When the bombers finally appeared, so did nearly 100 German fighters. The 332nd fought furiously, claiming 11 kills, but 15 B-17s still went down in minutes. Critics pounced, but post-battle analysis revealed the truth: the Red Tails had prevented a massacre against impossible odds. By 1945, the Luftwaffe was collapsing, but Germany unleashed one final weapon: the Me-262 jet fighter. On March 24, Davis led 43 Red Tails on a 1,600-mile round trip to Berlin to escort bombers striking the Daimler-Benz factory. The world's first jet streaked in to intercept. Even against this revolutionary threat, the Red Tails held their ground. By war's end, they had flown 15,000 sorties, 1,578 missions, and earned a reputation not just as warriors, but as history's rebuttal to the lies of racial inferiority. As the Red Tails approached Berlin on March 24, 1945, the sky filled with silver shapes. It was the largest force of German jet fighters ever assembled for a single interception. The Messerschmitt Me-262, the world's first operational jet, could outrun any Allied plane by over 100 miles per hour. Lieutenant Roscoe Brown, however, had studied their weaknesses. "We knew the German jets were faster," he later explained. "Instead of chasing them, we maneuvered into their blind spots." Brown angled his Mustang upward, squeezed off 3 long bursts, and watched the jet's canopy blow off as the pilot bailed out. Moments later, Lieutenant Earl Lane pulled off what seemed impossible, downing a Me-262 with a 2,000-yard deflection shot using the new K-14 gun sight. Lieutenant Charles Brantley added a 3rd kill. In a single afternoon, the Tuskegee Airmen had destroyed more German jets than many entire fighter groups managed during the war. For this mission, the 332nd Fighter Group earned a Distinguished Unit citation. Not every story ended in victory. 32 Tuskegee pilots became prisoners of war. Among them was Lieutenant Alexander Jefferson, shot down in August 1944 over southern France. Interrogated by German officers, he was shocked by the depth of their intelligence. "They knew my father was a teacher, my mother's maiden name, even details about our airfield in Italy," Jefferson recalled. Sent to Stalag Luft III, he found himself treated the same as white American officers. Some bomber crew prisoners even thanked him for red tail protection. The irony was bitter: Jefferson experienced more equality inside a Nazi prison camp than he would upon returning home, where segregation immediately reasserted itself. Still, within the skies of Europe, bomber crews built their own mythology about the Red Tails. They spoke of the way the crimson-painted Mustangs wagged their wings in greeting, the way they refused to abandon crippled bombers, even when easier kills tempted them away. To those crews, they weren't black or white, they were angels. Red Tail angels. The numbers told the same story. Research showed that bombers escorted by the 332nd lost only 27 aircraft to enemy fighters, compared to an average of 46 for other P-51 groups. This superior protection came despite flying some of the longest and most dangerous missions of the war. By VE Day, the Tuskegee Airmen had written a combat record that demolished every pre-war prejudice. They flew 1,578 missions, logged more than 15,000 sorties, and claimed 112 aerial victories, 3 of them against the Me-262. They destroyed 150 aircraft on the ground, nearly 1,000 locomotives, trucks, and rail cars, and even crippled an Italian destroyer. The cost was high: 66 pilots killed in action, 32 captured, and dozens more lost in training. Yet their courage was undeniable. 96 distinguished flying crosses, hundreds of air medals, and multiple unit citations bore witness to their achievements. The Red Tails proved that skill, discipline, and sacrifice, not skin color, defined a warrior. What began as an experiment ended as legend. Only the best survived Tuskegee's training program. Colonel Noel Parrish, the base commander, called the men who made it through a super-selected group. Their progression through aircraft types told the story of their struggle. The 99th Fighter Squadron began in hand-me-down P-40 Warhawks, planes already outdated when they arrived in North Africa. Against the Luftwaffe's Messerschmitt Bf 109s and Focke-Wulf 190s, the P-40 lagged in speed, climb, and firepower. Yet the Tuskegee pilots exploited what strengths they had: superior turning ability, rugged construction, and above all, discipline. With these tools, they held their own. Then came the transformation. In July 1944, the Red Tails received the P-51 Mustang, the finest fighter of the war. Its Packard-built Merlin engine pushed it to 437 miles per hour. Its 6.50 caliber machine guns could shred any German aircraft. Most important of all, its range, with drop tanks, over 1,600 miles, meant it could escort bombers to Berlin and back. With the Mustang, the Red Tails became equals of any fighter group in the U.S. Army Air Forces. But behind every pilot stood dozens of unsung heroes. Of the 16,000 men who wore the Tuskegee uniform, fewer than 1,000 were pilots. The rest were mechanics, armorers, and crew chiefs who kept the planes flying. At Ramitelli Airfield in Italy, conditions were primitive, and supplies scarce. The 332nd often found itself last in line for parts, yet their aircraft availability rate matched or exceeded that of white units. On March 24, 1944, a German bombing raid killed several ground personnel. Even under fire, they pulled aircraft away from burning fuel dumps, saving the squadron's combat strength. The stakes could not have been higher. Each B-17 Flying Fortress cost nearly $250,000 and carried 10 highly trained crewmen. Losing a single bomber rippled across the war effort. Colonel Benjamin O. Davis, Jr. drilled this lesson into his men: anyone can shoot down a fighter if they abandon their post. It takes discipline to stay with the bombers when the enemy is running. From that discipline came innovation. The Red Tails perfected a 3-layer escort defense: close cover weaving directly above the bombers, medium cover intercepting enemy formations, and high cover protecting against diving attacks. It required absolute coordination, and they mastered it. The Tuskegee Airmen fought 2 wars, against fascism abroad and racism at home. Their victories over the Luftwaffe made headlines in black newspapers, feeding the Pittsburgh Courier's Double V campaign, victory against Nazism and against segregation. Yet in mainstream America, their achievements were downplayed. The War Department rarely publicized them. By 1945, even the Luftwaffe knew who they were, calling the red-tailed Mustangs the Schwarze Vogelmenschen. Many white Americans, however, still did not know black pilots even existed. Victory in Europe brought the Red Tails no parades. Instead, questions hung over their future. The Army Air Forces planned to maintain segregation, even as combat had proven its absurdity. For decades, their story was neglected. Pilots like Lee Archer, with 4 confirmed victories, rarely spoke of their records. "Nobody believed me anyway," Archer admitted. A black fighter pilot must be lying. Yet the legacy remained. In the skies over Europe, the Red Tails had written their answer in fire and steel. In 1948, President Harry Truman signed Executive Order 9981, officially integrating the U.S. military, a decision shaped by the Tuskegee Airmen's undeniable combat record. 6 years later, Benjamin O. Davis Jr., who had once led the Red Tails over Berlin, became the first black general in the newly created U.S. Air Force. Recognition, however, came slowly. It wasn't until 2007 that President George W. Bush awarded the Tuskegee Airmen the Congressional Gold Medal. Of the nearly 1,000 pilots who once carried the Red Tails into battle, barely 300 lived to see that day. Many had waited over 6 decades for their country to finally acknowledge what history had long recorded. Their record speaks for itself: 112 aerial victories over the Luftwaffe, 3 German Me-262 jets destroyed in a single mission, 150 aircraft destroyed on the ground, and only 27 bombers lost, compared to an average of 46 in other groups. 96 Distinguished Flying Crosses were awarded to the men of the 332nd Fighter Group. These were not legends or myths, but facts. The Luftwaffe knew exactly who they faced, calling them the Schwarze Vogelmenschen, the Black Birdmen. Prejudice crumbled when confronted with such performance. Every bomber protected, every enemy destroyed, every mission completed was proof beyond debate. The color of a pilot's skin had nothing to do with his skill or courage. Roscoe Brown, who shot down a German jet over Berlin, captured their true victory: "We didn't just fight the Germans. We fought ignorance, prejudice, and hatred, and we won all three." The Tuskegee Airmen had not only changed the outcome of battles. They had changed history itself, turning mockery into respect, racism into recognition, and leaving behind a legacy that still soars.